Well, we've been here before, revisiting some of the best moments in the trial of former Governor Rod Blagojevich while a jury of his peers deliberates. Only this time the jury's a bit of a girls' club. 11 women and 1 man are weighing the ex-governor's fate. That lineup is legal, but how does a female-dominant jury affect deliberations or even a verdict? To find out, we turn once again to jury consultant Alan Tuerkheimer. Alan, welcome back to 848.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. So a jury made up of 11 women, 1 man. How rare is that?
It is really rare. Even if more women show up in the veneer for jury selection, it's unlikely that each side is going to have an ideal juror in mind, which turns out to be all female or all male. So each side had a certain strategy, and each side was looking to kick off males, which has led to 11 females and 1 male on this jury.
So it may be not that they wanted women, but they didn't want men. A gender balance isn't required, but can you talk a little bit about why that might have been the strategy from the point of view of the defense and the prosecution?
I can only speculate because gender is not typically predictive of case outlook and case leaning, and especially in a case such as this. Now, if you have a case of, say, a sexual assault or a gender discrimination case, then I think gender would be a key attribute in terms of how jurors filter information because of their experiences and attitudes that co-vary with gender.
Yeah.
So in this case, one can only guess. There's a lot of social science literature out there. Men and women do process information differently. Women, their brains are said to be more multi-tracked and more networked, where men's brains are said to be more compartmentalized. So maybe the prosecution was thinking, with its circumstantial case where jurors have to connect the dots, it's more likely that women are going to be able to do that task.
Their brains are that way or their lives are that way?
It's a good question. Maybe both. And a lot of it just depends on what the jurors said when they were answering questions during voir dire. And who knows, I don't know what the defense was thinking. Maybe they thought that just based on the last case, the one juror that was a holdout on several counts, including the Senate seat, maybe they were thinking, well, she was a woman, so maybe we should have women also. They maybe thought men were too harsh and would be too critical of the former governor. And maybe they just thought that, and this is somewhat true, that women tend to be more deliberative and explore more options and maybe are a little more concerned with fairness. So I think that's maybe what the defense was thinking.
So all things that you would want in a jury. And given what I've heard about the instructions to the jury, this is, even though this has been a case that's been trimmed down on the part of the prosecution, it's still a very complex set of charges that they're looking at.
Absolutely. The charges are condensed, and remember, the former governor's brother's not here anymore. He wasn't charged, and there's been a timeline. So both sides are making efforts to streamline the case. But if you think about it along the gender perspective, there's just as much variability within gender as there is between gender, especially in this context. If you have, for example, say Sarah Palin and Tina Fey show up for jury selection, they're similar from a demographic standpoint. Obviously, they're both females, and they're roughly the same age. They
even look a little bit alike.
They even look a little bit alike, exactly. So it would be unwise to have a strategy exclusively based on gender. And
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that the key is, once you have gender as a determination, then you have to delve deeper in jury selection. If, just thinking about this, if Sarah Palin showed up in this case for jury selection, as a former governor, you'd have to ask her questions and get a sense, well, would she identify with the former ex-governor, also Blagojevich, because she also experienced some similar allegations about ethics, or maybe that would make you think she would identify with the defense, or perhaps she would look at her own career and think that she would hold herself and other governors to a higher standard, which might make her more prosecution, along with other similar attitudes that she might have.
So again, you're looking at the experiences that a juror would bring to the table rather than their gender. But I wonder if we're thinking about this or struck by this, because certainly the makeup of the jury has gotten a lot of attention, not because of the potential bias of gender, whether you're a man or a woman, but because of the bias of the legal system historically. I mean, women, for most of our history, have not been able to serve on juries, and it was only recently, wasn't it, in the 90s, that it was ruled that you could not dismiss somebody on the basis of their gender from a jury.
Each side can make a motion if the other side is striking jurors systematically based on race. And the thing is, if there are different classes that are protected, but in this case, since each side was striking males, it would be impossible for one side to say that the other side is doing it because they were actually doing it. So you couldn't say that, look, this is unfair, judge. The prosecution is systematically striking males while the defense is doing it. So that wouldn't have any merit at all.
I mean, when do those factors come into play, any of these social markers, whether you're talking about race or class or gender?
It really depends on the case. If you have a case where there's a lawsuit against, say, a hospital because a baby was born prematurely, that's going to generate sympathy, and men and women do sometimes have different levels of sympathy and make decisions based on emotion in different ways. This case, there is not sympathy. Women are not going to be sympathetic to the ex-governor. In fact, the prosecution might be thinking that women are going to be a little more repulsed by some of his antics and some of the things that he said on tape. So the defense wouldn't have been wise if they thought that Blagojevich he's going to play on the heartstrings of female jurors for any reason, because that's not going to happen.
So playing to gender could actually potentially backfire.
Yes,
or
it could.
Ideas about gender, yeah.
Yes, maybe they think that he's going to charm the women a little bit more, and he's going to maybe be able to talk to them in a way that'll make them more open to hearing his version of the case, but they're not going to be sympathetic.
You know, it's interesting. You've been talking a lot about thinking about the experiences that jurors bring to the table, and those can vary based on their gender, based on their race, based on class. But you're also looking for impartial jurors, right? People who are going to not just factor in their own experiences, but factor in the law and be open to legal arguments that may be kind of complicated for us to feel open to, sort of like the battered woman's defense, I think, gets invoked. Does gender matter there?
Well, I think it does, just because it co-varies with other attitudes and experiences. And you're right. Idealistically, you want fair and impartial jurors, but we all know that this is an adversarial system, so you're going to want jurors that are predisposed to your case, or more importantly, because it's really jury deselection and not jury selection, you want to get rid of those who are negatively disposed to your case. And if the other side does its homework, you're going to get jurors who are going to look at the evidence in a fair and impartial way. The interesting thing about this is each juror has an ideal juror in their minds, and it co-varies with gender. Or maybe they feel that gender is the exclusive factor that will prove determinative.
Yeah, here's the horse race question for you, Alan. I know you've been following the trial and thinking about the jury and the reactions such that we know them. Do you have any sense of the outcome this time around?
I don't. It's typical, and this jury knows that everybody's watching, the world's watching, the country's watching, the state's watching. You can filter it down any way you want. They know that their verdict's going to be heavily scrutinized, so they're taking their time. And in the first couple of days, it's more of an orientation. Leaders are identified, the dynamic starts to experience cohesion, and tasks and goals become identified. So it took them, especially because the instructions were somewhat lengthy, several days to even get into the issues in the case.
Attorney Alan Tuerkheimer is an expert jury consultant with Zagnoli, McAvoy, and Foley. Alan, always good to talk with you. Thank you.
Thanks. Nice being here.